During this time, I get to the special privilege of introducing our guest speaker, David French. If you've been going to Central for a while, you've probably heard of David. If you are visiting with us, I do have a few things that I will say about David, just so you kind of know what he is doing and as part of Central, what we have been supporting. David French is Central's missionary partner in Zambia, which is in Africa. And David serves as the director of Zambia missions and as the president of Daybreak, Mission of Hope. His primary responsibilities include Dean of Daybreak Bible College and the administration, Bible teacher, fundraising in the U.S., general contractor over the construction at Daybreak, and as a supervisor over the entire ministry in Zambia. So in the first service, I joked with David that, if he ever came back home, I'm hiring. We'd love for David to come. That offer still stands. So just if you and Lori decide to come back, very impressive. I did hear you say that you learned a lot of that as you were just over there, and that's kind of take that the same way with my relationship with Christ. Is it's ongoing, and there's just a lot of things that we need to learn, and we don't always have to know what to do. We just need to go. David's wife, Lori, also serves as a supervisor of the primary school there and the women's program, and as a teacher in college. And David and Lori have lived in Zambia since 2004. And as a church, we have supported them pretty much since the day that they started. So, David.
I meant to take that away from you so you wouldn't read that again. That's from the web page, meant to impress. But, I didn't get to learn that stuff in college or anything. That's just trial and error. And sometimes you have to wear a hat that you don't know how to wear, you just do it. Anyway, it is great to be with you all here today at Central. We always enjoy coming and visiting the congregation here, and I'm sorry that Lori is not with us. I'm getting an echo here for some reason. Anyway, she's attending online this hour along with Karen in Zambia. I just texted them. They're both online, and they told me to be sure to tell you all hello. Lori was a little irritated with me that I scheduled to come here, and she wasn't going to be with us. She says, I always enjoy going and visiting the church there at Central. She's actually in Memphis with my mom, who had surgery this past week, so I'll say hi to my mom as well. But it is technology now is phenomenal, what all we can do. But it's great to have them with us and to be together here this morning to share with you about our work in Zambia. Let me say, if you're not getting our newsletter, I would love to get your email address or your regular address. These two newsletters, digital and regular mail, they're different now, and so you might want to be on both of them, but I would love to add you to that so you can keep up with our work in Zambia. There's our web page too, and you can sign up there or communicate. Our email address and contact information is all there on our web page, and we'd love to correspond with you. In Acts the 14th chapter, the Apostle Paul had gone off on his first missionary journey, and when he came back, he came to the church at Antioch, which had sent him, and he gave a report about the great things that God is doing among the Gentiles and how the kingdom of God is advancing and doing great things in the world. Well, in the same way, I am here today to share with you about what great things God is doing in Africa, specifically having to do with Zambia. And so I want to share with the congregation and give you an update and thank you all for helping to be a part of this work. And yes, you have been a part of this work since 2003, actually, when I was preaching at Pine Valley, and I was at Charlotte and then Pine Valley and Wilmington, and got to know you all, and that's where we began together from the very beginning of this work. Now, we've been in Zambia for 17 years now, and you asked me, well, how's the ministry going there? How's it going? And I'll just tell you up front, the bottom line is last year was our best year. It feels like that it took us quite a few years to really figure out how to do this work, but in the last 3-4 years, it seems like that now it's reached that point that I'm happy with the kind of progress that I'm seeing. That we're doing the best that we can do. Yeah, there's some improvements, but still to be made, but we've kind of, I feel like, reached our stride, and things are going along well. I want to share with you the three main parts of our ministry. There are other things that we do, but I don't have time to get into all those. So I'm going to focus on these three main ministries that we're involved in. First of all, the Bible College, because that is our primary ministry that we are focused on. We have 3 classrooms. There is a small classroom, and then we have a large auditorium. I mean, it is big, 50 by 110 feet long. We're able to do worship there Sunday morning and chapel and combined classes, and we're starting to do lectureships, so that has multi-purpose as well. And then we have a new office building that we just finished, and in that we have another smaller third classroom as well. We have 30 apartments for married students. These are just simple 3-room houses. They don't have indoor plumbing, kitchens, toilets, and all that. That's all outside because we do not want to increase their standard of living. They come from the bush, and we want them to be comfortable returning home to the bush. We just finished about a year ago with our new dorm that holds some of the single students that we have that are coming. When you add it all up, the students, their wives, and by the way, the wives are also students going through the women's program. But when you add up all the students and their wives and the singles, we have about 85 to 90 students capacity that we have there. Now, we've had about 600 that have gone through our training program in these 17 years. And about 5 years ago, we moved from our old campus at Mapepe to Daybreak. It's a bigger, better campus, and when we did that, we learned a lot of things the first 10 years, so we implemented a lot of changes in our new campus. And one of the things I'm going to tell you about it in a few minutes is the way we designed a new program from 2 years to 3 years. And from that new program, we've had 3 classes to graduate. And the thing I'm happy to tell you is I felt like this last graduating class from November, just 2 or 3 months ago, was the best that we ever produced. The men and the women, they were just good students that we were able to graduate. So I feel very good about that as well. Now, our mission statement is that we're there to train and develop self-supporting spiritual leaders who are equipped for holistic rural ministry. That means that we are fundamentally a training ministry. We're not out there doing the ministry, we're training others to be able to do it. That's where you get that multiplication and will last beyond my lifetime, that it will be able to continue going. So we're fundamentally about training people in ministry. But the thing that I want to focus on that's the most important, and I hope you'll remember this, that is we want to develop spiritual leadership. We want to train. If we don't do anything else right, we want to make sure that we develop spiritual leaders for the kingdom of God. Now, that means, since we're trying to develop spiritual leaders, that means that spiritual formation is what we're all about. Life transformation. We want to see a relationship with Christ change who these men and women are that are coming to our school. And so you say, well, why is spiritual formation your number one priority? Why is that? Well, let's talk about Zambia for a moment. Receptivity is very high in Zambia. 85% of Zambians claim to be Christian. Now, I don't know that that means a lot, but 85% claim that they are Christian. And by the way, Africa's gone Christian. It's not Islamic. Islam's not making much difference there. It's gone Christian. Done gone there. In fact, you may not know this, but there are twice as many people that attend church in Africa now than attend church in all of North America and Europe combined. Twice as many. And the churches of Christ, there are now more members of the churches of Christ in Africa than there are here in the United States. And so that's why you hear a lot of people talking about that Christianity is now southern hemisphere. It is moved from the west in the northern hemisphere. It's now the global south. That is where the heart and center of Christianity has gravitated in the last, especially last 20 years. So receptivity is very high, but Christianity is still very immature. It has not yet really changed the way people are living. They go to church, they claim to be Christian, but it's not changed the way that they're dealing in their relationships with one another. It's not changing the way husbands treat their wives and the honesty and corruption. And it's not changing those things. And so you ask, why is that? Why has Christianity not matured more than it has? Well, You know, we kind of got to cut them a break here. Yes, Christianity has been in Africa for 3 or 4 centuries, but it's really only been since World War II that Christianity began to really explode and take the continent. So just 75 years, it takes time for the Word of God to really transform hearts and minds. Another thing is you have to understand the African worldview. The African religion, if we want to call it that, and it's religion in a very different way we think of it, but it is about manipulating spirit power or spirit beings, the ancestors, the spirits, the ancestral spirits. And so if bad things are happening to you in your life, what you do is you go to the witch doctor and he'll diagnose, like a doctor, he'll diagnose what is causing your problem. It's usually something to do with the spirit world. And so what you do is he will either use some of his magic or potions, or he will tell you to do certain rituals, like go make a sacrifice or something to a certain god or spirit. And what you're trying to do there is you're using ritual or the magic of the witch doctor to manipulate spirit power so that instead of it being against you, it turns in your favor. So you're trying to appease the ancestors or the spirits so that they will give you favors. Okay, so when they become Christians, that worldview doesn't go away. And now they begin to approach God in the same way. So if I go to church and make God happy with me, He'll bless me. I see a lot of Africans, and I've seen this since I was in Africa in the 80s. They come out of church and they go, well, God's going to bless me. And I say, why do you say that? And they say, well, I went to church today and I put money in the collection plate and I took the Lord's Supper. I sang without an instrument. I made God happy with me. Now He'll bless me. And I think, yeah, but what about this woman over here that ain't your wife and you're dishonest in your business and this and that? Well, yeah, but I went to church. God will be happy with me now. You see, you're trying to manipulate God. It's sort of like the chief or a rich man. If you get to know him and do something nice for him and get his favor, then he will bless you and give you special favors. So the idea is if I do something for God, then He's going to bless me. And so that's kind of a mechanistic worldview by which they're approaching God. So, they're going to church and they're trying to make God happy to bless them, but they don't understand that relationship with God changes who you are and it changes the way you live and the way you treat other people. That level hasn't yet really, it's in some places it is, but for the most part, that just really hasn't reached the level of maturity in most of Africa. Now, another thing that's important to understand this, and this is where I'll probably blame us missionaries, not just Churches of Christ, but across the board in the denominational world as well, is we haven't done a good job developing spiritual leaders. We've trained church leaders. We've run them through our Bible colleges, which are Western schools, training schools, and it doesn't work too well. And so I hear this, I know what's going on in the Churches of Christ among our leaders, and I hear this from the denominational missionaries and church heads, and what they're telling me is our leaders are poorly trained, they are corrupt and immoral, and they're preaching the gospel of prosperity. In other words, if you will give to the Lord, then the Lord's going to bless you. Well, that fits that African worldview, but see, the preacher's got his hand in the cookie jar too. So they're preaching this gospel of prosperity. And we got a lot of embezzling church funds and things like that, and preachers are also immoral as anybody else. So if you don't have good spiritual leadership, you see, then you've got a problem. And so when I started realizing all of this in the early years that I was in Africa, I changed my philosophy that mission work is not about planning churches. And that's the way I was taught. But it's not about planning churches because I realized I can go plant a church in a week or two. It doesn't mean I've made one disciple. So I shifted from church planning to making disciples. And by the way, that's what Jesus said. He said, go make disciples. He didn't say go plant churches. If I make a disciple, he is church. He becomes church. Church gets planted automatically. It's about making disciples. And then I got to realizing, what is a disciple and what all that entails. And I started realizing that if we're going to make disciples, we've got to have spiritual leaders who are disciples who can make disciples. So there's where I started focusing on spiritual leadership as the key. That is what I believe Africa needs more than anything else. Well, that's why we're focusing on spiritual formation. Now, the next question is, well, how do you do it? Now, I want to tell you what, that's the hard question. I started 12 years ago reading and studying all this, and I didn't find much out there about it. And so I had to hunt, and I actually found some sources in the Desert Fathers and monasticism and places like that, and started trial and error and figuring this out. And along the way, I started realizing, hey, there's a lot of other people talking about the same thing now. I think that's the way the Holy Spirit works, you know. It wasn't just affecting me, it was touching other people as well with this need for discipleship. Because my goodness, I think we need to wake up to this in America. We got too many churchgoers, but where's discipleship? And maybe that's why we're seeing a decline in Christianity in the West. But anyway, how do you go about making disciples? And this is the hardest question that I have ever tried to answer. And so in my working on this, I came up with 3 things that we have done. We've done 3 things to develop a training program to train spiritual leaders. First of all, we totally overhauled our ministry. When we moved from Mapepe to Daybreak in 2015, I had learned a lot at Mapepe, and I totally changed the infrastructure and designed a new campus, which was very advantageous. And one of the things at Mapepe, what we had done is a 2-year training school, and we had built dormitories because they didn't have a lot of money in the beginning, and that's the best I could do. And, well, what that meant is we have a lot of guys coming there without their wives for 2 years, and that isn't a good thing, especially in Africa. And it meant I started getting single men, young, unmarried, and that's not the best student to work with. You need some older, more mature men. So when we moved to the new campus, we didn't build dormitories. I built married student apartments. We just finished our dormitory last year. We built married students, and we said we want to get married students. In fact, we want 75% of our students to be married, and they have to bring their wife. If the wife doesn't come, they can't come. If the wife don't want to stay, they can't stay. That's how important. We're training couples, and the women have to go through our women's program, and they graduate as well through that program. But we want 75% of our students to be married. We want them to be older, more mature. And we want to get men who are already doing ministry. I don't want to get guys that, I'm thinking about it, or I'd like to do it, especially if you pay me. I don't want those guys. I want guys that already are committed to the Lord, and they're already doing it regardless of whether they've got any financial help or whatever. And then we want recommendations from a lot of different sources in their home villages that they're a caliber of person that we can train. So we started recruiting a better student, quality of student, and we're training them instead of 2 years. Now we're working with them for 3. And why 3? Well, if nothing else, Jesus took 3 years, so I don't think I can do better than Jesus. All right? So the second thing, how are you going to, what's the program, your methodology, your training? What kind of training is it going to be? And so what I did is over the last 12 years, I've come up with what I now have identified as the 7 essential components to spiritual formation. Unfortunately, I don't have time to get into this, but the elders and I were able to get together last night. We had a big, long discussion about this, thankfully. I love talking about this, and it kills me not to get to share this with you. But I have identified these 7 things, and there may be some other things you could add and change the list or whatever, but these are the 7 that I've come up with. And the thing that I got to realizing is when I compare it to the Western educational model, the way we train leaders in the West, I find it won't work in Africa. And I'm not so sure that it doesn't need to be drastically improved in this country now. But the way we train leaders in the West is pretty much based on the university model that came out of the Renaissance and Protestantism. And I think it's lacking some things because it focuses way too much on knowledge and academics. And there's a lot that's missing with that. And I found in Africa, giving people a bunch of information isn't going to transform their life. There's a whole lot more that's needed than that. So yes, the Bible is very important. Teaching them in a Bible college is very important, and it's the first one on my list. People don't grow if they don't have a knowledge of the Word of God. But there is so much more that needs to happen, especially practical application and mentoring, spiritual mentoring. And again, I wish I had more time to talk about it, but this is how I think you go about making disciples, and I think this or things like this needs to start being implemented in our churches here in America as well. So we have, we're developing spiritual leaders, but we want them also to be self-supporting. I've talked to a lot of denominational leaders and African heads of the denominations as I did a lot of research. One of the things I heard them telling me is they said, our pastors are a burden to our churches. We have run them through our Bible colleges and produced guys to go out there and get full-time jobs as a minister, but the problem is the churches are too poor and they can't support them. So the pastors end up preaching the gospel of prosperity, or they start embezzling money from the church treasury and things like that. Our churches, our preachers, our pastors are a burden to our churches. So from that, I realized, no, they've got to be self-supporting. You see, the located full-time preacher in a church is something America can afford, but that is not a model that you can make work in a place like Africa that is so poor. So these leaders, they've got to be self-supporting so they're not a burden to the churches. In fact, I even reversed it and said, we want to train you so you can make enough money to help support the church. I've just totally reversed the idea. So we're teaching them agriculture, and we teach them a lot of basic agriculture. We teach them especially how to do drip irrigation, because in Zambia it rains about 4 or 5 months out of the year if they're lucky, one growing season. But you can grow food year-round in Zambia if you have water. The problem, though, is that they got to walk 3, 4, 5 miles to get water. Now, drip irrigation is the most economical use of water. If you'll just fill 3 or 4 buckets a day, you can feed your family and maybe even sell some or give to other families that need it. So we're teaching a lot about agriculture. For years, we were teaching agriculture, and we were also feeding them in our cafeteria at Mapepe. And it didn't work. I was kind of frustrated with that. Why are they going home and not implementing what we've taught them? And then I realized it's just a class that they have to pass, agriculture. They do it, but we're still feeding them. So I said, well, we'll stop feeding them. And now at daybreak, for 3 years, we feed them for 3 months while they're getting their gardens going. But after that, they're on their own. They got to support themselves. It reduces our cost of feeding them, but it ensures that they will master the skills of agriculture. So now we're seeing when our students go home, they're all doing it now. I get pictures and all kinds of things of the students bragging about their agriculture that they've taken home. We also teach them how to raise chickens, because they can raise chickens and sell them and make a little bit of money from that. So we want them to be self-supporting, but more than that, we want to equip our students for holistic ministry, not just to the spiritual side of life, but we need to address the physical side of life. Africa is such, people are so poor there, and the physical suffering of people is so great. I don't see how we can ignore that. And in fact, in Africa, if your religion doesn't help you physically, it's worthless. They're not all that concerned about after they die. They're concerned with the here and now survival. And if you don't speak to the needs here and now, you just don't have much relevance in Africa. So we can't ignore the physical side of their life. And so we want our students not only to be able to support themselves and teaching them agriculture, but we want them to be able to go home and teach the people in their villages how they too can use drip irrigation and feed themselves, and using the basic agricultural principles that we teach them. Zambia happens to be, according to the UN, the most malnourished country in all of Africa. And I believe that teaching them how to farm better and be more productive year-round using drip irrigation is a great way for us to to help address the problem of malnutrition in Zambia. And you know, a lot of these big programs the UN does and USAID and all that stuff, they go in with lots of computers and technology, and they do some project for 5 years, but when they leave, the Africans, they can't do what we have done, and they don't have the resources. It just collapse. Most of the agricultural products that the West does in Africa all fail. This is just simple agriculture that we're teaching them. Now, we also want our students to learn some other skills, so we teach them how to be both the student and their wife how to be a community school teacher. So maybe when they go back home, they'll be able to start a community school, a village school in their church. They might even make a little income from that, but they'll be able to minister to the children in the village when they go home. And they get practical experience teaching in our school. And you see, in Africa, you don't just teach people in a classroom. You got to get them out there doing it, whether it's agriculture or teaching. They got to learn by doing it, or evangelism, disciple making. They learn by doing it. And so we give them practical experience in our primary school. And then we teach them how to work with children, especially vulnerable children. They're all over the place. Every village has all these orphans and vulnerable children. They're malnourished. And so we're trying to teach them how that they can organize and help the church or their village to respond to the needs of children in the local village. You see, that's all practical training. And then we're also teaching them some basic medicine. This is something my wife does a lot with. She teaches them a lot of basic medicine because healthcare and medical care just hardly exists in Africa. And there's just a lot of things that we can teach these students so that when they go back to the village, they'll be able to minister to the physical needs when people are sick and unhealthy. They can respond to that. And then we're doing a lot with marriage and the family. I wish I had more time to talk about this, but marriages are really in trouble there because they've moved from arranged marriages that were stable because they didn't really have any expectation for love and romance. Well, now they've been influenced by the West. They want love marriages. No longer letting father and mother pick your mate. Now we want to pick. Well, that isn't working out so well. Not at all. Divorces have gone up the wazoo, and so the problem is they haven't mastered the relational skills that's necessary to build love marriages. And so men still treat their wife like a cow and beat her, and you don't have a good marriage when you do that kind of stuff. And by the way, women can give it back just as well as the men, by the way. I've seen that. So we're doing a lot with marriage and trying to teach them relational skills. At least they can go back to the village and maybe teach that to the next generation, and they'll have better marriages in the future. So this is what I mean by holistic training. We're trying to equip them for holistic ministry where they can do both the spiritual and the physical. And I believe that is in keeping with what we see with Jesus and his ministry, where Jesus went, and when he came, you look at his ministry and the way he did ministry, he ministered not only preaching and speaking to the spiritual side, but he also engaged in healing and responding to people's physical needs as well. And we certainly can't ignore that in Africa. Now, the third thing that we did, the changing of infrastructure and redesigning the program, number 2, was developing a methodology of developing and equipping our students. The third thing is we had to develop a staff. And this has been very challenging, but we now, I believe, have the best Bible teaching staff that we've ever had. Periodically, I've had to replace guys, but slowly, we're getting good guys in place. We have a director of the Bible college. We then have an older man who's the dean of students. We have an older man who has a lot of experience in ministry, who's taking them out, doing ministry, helping them with that practical application. We have, because spiritual dimension is so important, I have 2 guys that are focused in and making sure we're getting the job done when it comes to the spiritual development of our students. We also have an agriculture teacher who's very well trained, doing an incredible job with our agriculture program. And then we have 2 women who are wives of our teachers that are now working with the women's program. And these women are doing a fantastic job. When I started bringing married students, they started bringing their wives, and that's when I realized, boy, there's problems in marriage. I mean, we woke up in the middle of the night. One of the students beat his wife, and we had to take her to the hospital to get stitched up. This kind of stuff, bad stuff going on. Fighting in the middle of the night and all that stuff. Well, these women, I've noticed in the last year, I'm not seeing those problems. They're making a difference. So they are really doing a top-notch job developing the wives. And I've really noticed, because they really don't have a way to get to know their spouse before they marry, I'm finding some of my best students have gone out and married the devil. And so we got a real problem with some of the great men, but they got a horrible wife. And so we've had to really work with the women, and that's why we want both the husbands and the wives there. Well, that's our Bible college. As I said, it is our primary ministry, but I want to share with you the two other areas. These are what you would call humanitarian side of our ministry. First of all, the primary school. We have grades K through 7. We have a capacity for about 250 students. And we had to start our own school because there's no school in our area, and that raised a problem because where are our students and our staff, where are their children going to go to school? So there's a real need in the community as well in our staff, so we had to start our own primary school for that purpose. But there's a real need for quality education. In my estimation, education in Africa is going downhill, not getting better, unfortunately, especially in Zambia. And part of the reason is that teachers there, it's centralized education, top down, and you don't have local accountability. And so a lot of times the teachers don't even show up for work. They're from another tribe, and they're working in a school located in another tribe, and they just don't really care. The way they teach, they're still using the old British rote system. They don't have textbooks. The teacher is lucky to have a textbook, and the teacher just writes it up on the blackboard. The students copy it down, memorize it, regurgitate it on a test, and that's it. You pass, you've got it. Well, that falls very short. They're not teaching how to study, how to learn, critical thinking skills. So there's a lot to be desired. We're trying to develop a quality education. And education is supposed to be free in Zambia, but it's not really. So a lot of students don't go past the 6th grade there. And not only is there need for good quality education, but there is especially a need for Christian education. I have been amazed in Africa how that the parents are coming to church, but they just leave their kids at home. They have no Sunday school. It's like they hadn't even thought about developing the faith of their children. And then, they grow up and they start having problems when they're teenagers. And yes, they have problems with teenagers just like we do. But, they haven't really focused on how to develop the spiritual life of children there. And so this is a real need, and we're trying to address it in training our students. Now, one thing that we did this past year is we hired one of our graduates from November, 2 or 3 months ago, Chaz. He and his wife were two of the best students we ever had, most spiritual-minded couple I think we ever had. So we hired him, and he is now focusing on the spiritual life and development of our students in the primary school. And so he conducts a daily chapel. He teaches Bible classes. He's also going off campus ministering to the families of our children in the villages. So we have an outreach component of it as well. And Chris, being a graduate of Daybreak Bible College as well, he's working with the students in the Bible College and bringing them over so that they can teach Bible, do chapel, and go out and minister to the families of our students. And that way our Bible students are getting practical experience working with children. We want our students not only to be able to go home and start a community church and a community school in their village, but we want them to be able to minister to the spiritual needs of children in the village as well. So that is where our students and their wives are getting practical experience teaching, both teaching, education, and ministering to spiritual needs in our school. That's practical training. You learn by doing it. So that's what we do. Now, we've done a lot this past year to develop our primary school. One of the things we did is we hired 6 new teachers and replaced a few other ones that didn't have adequate education. We've now got teachers that have the best education that they provide in Zambia. We've got 6 new teachers. We developed an assistant director, Lucando, and his wife. She's also a teacher in our school. And we've known Lucando for a long time. He is a quality guy, very intelligent, and he stepped in to work with Lori and overseeing our primary school, and he is doing a fantastic job with that as well. And then we have, as I mentioned a minute ago, a new campus minister that is working with the spiritual dimension of our primary school. Now, another thing we did this past year is we built 5 new classrooms, and in November it was almost finished, ready to start the new year in January. And guess what? A windstorm came through. Blew the roof off, part of the wall got knocked off, and it balled it up and threw it 50 yards over into the other 5 classroom wing and messed it up. Well, a lot of people who are supporting the work in Zambia heard about this, and money just came in, and we were able quickly to make the repairs. And so we got it all fixed up, and we opened as scheduled in January. So Satan can do what he wants, but the Lord wins in the end, right? It's a nice looking building too. So we are back in business with our primary school. I want to tell you about our lunch program. This is a program I'm really excited about. We noticed a lot of the children coming from the community are coming from poor farming families, and we're coming to school, and they're very malnourished, and we noticed at recess they don't play football, soccer, they don't laugh very much, they're not doing well academically, they're missing a lot of school because they're sick all the time. And so we came up with the idea, let's start a lunch program, and let's give them high nutrition with protein, because they don't get much protein in their diet. So we developed a menu, cost us $12 a day. Can you believe that? $12 a day to feed all these students. And we started seeing a change. I mean, they got smarter. They stopped missing so much school. They started playing football at recess. And I was just amazed at what malnutrition does to African kids. And I told you, Zambia is the most malnourished in Africa. So this is really something that we're really happy about. Just $12 a day. This is what excites Lori and I. When we can take a little bit of money and we can make a big difference, now that's exciting. I mean, that's like going to the store and going to the car lot and seeing a car sold for 95% sale. I mean, that's exciting stuff for us. Now let me talk about Karen's Kids Children's Ministry. This is a ministry that's the passion of my daughter, Karen. And Karen is not just working with the children's ministry. I've got to just add, Karen's become an essential part of our ministry in Zambia. She is basically handling the administrative and daily operations of it. We talk to Karen every day when we're here in the U.S. We know everything that's going on. We got WhatsApp, and we can video chat with her. And we talk with her, and she's able to keep things running smoothly there in Zambia, doing a great job with that. But the children's ministry is her passion, and this is where she works as well. The purpose of Karen's Kids is just to save kids' lives. It's real simple. You see, in Zambia, as in most of Africa, half of the children die before they're 12 years old. But we started realizing most of them are dying in the first 2 or 3 years, and the reason is malnutrition. Mainly because something happens to the mother. The mother dies in childbirth or soon after, or the mother is too malnourished and she can't properly nurse the child, or the mother has HIV. 25% have HIV, and she shouldn't nurse the child, but that's the only option, so she does it anyway, and then 25% of those children end up with AIDS and die within 2 or 3 years as well. Malnutrition is the real problem of Africa. You hear a lot about malaria and trying to solve that, but I'm telling you, my kids get malaria, they'll probably survive it, 99% of the time probably. But African kids that are malnourished, they get malaria. That's why so many of them die. The real problem is malnutrition, in my opinion. So there are several things that Karen does. One, she provides baby formula to families where the mother is dead or unable to properly nurse that child. She'll provide baby formula. That saves a lot of kids' lives, and they end up being healthy, actually. Then there's kids that need medical assistance, and she'll help them with that. There's those that need to go in the hospital, and she'll help with that. There's children with special needs, and she'll respond to that. And then we have just finished building a temporary residence. We call it the baby house, that allow us to hold up to 30 children. Now, because of COVID, we didn't get to put that in operations this year. We hope to do this soon. But this will allow us to take in children temporarily. We do not believe in long-term orphan care in Africa. A lot of reasons for that, but basically children need to be raised, and they have their extended family that needs to do it. It's their responsibility. But there's a time when we need to provide temporary assistance until we can get that child placed back with the extended family in the village. So she'll work with that, but this, when we get it going, will allow us to increase the number of children. Karen has 4 children. 2 biological and 2 that are adopted. And so that's children is her passion. Well, those are the 3 main ministries that we have. There are other things we do. I just want to quickly mention one other, is that's our optical ministry. A brother in Amarillo gave us the money to buy an autofractor machine. This allows us to give people an eye exam. It produces a prescription, and we're able to give them donated eyeglasses. And that is really like curing the blind. I mean, to give someone 40, 50 years old who's never had a pair of glasses and give them their first, and one guy, you looked around, he says, "Oh, the trees have leaves. I never knew what that really looked like." You know, that's another cheap ministry. Donated eyeglasses, life-changing to do that. So we have the spiritual and we have the humanitarian side of our ministry. One thing, did you notice something in common about our humanitarian ministries? They're focusing on children, because that is where we believe that we can do the most good with what resources we have. The biggest bang for the least amount of money, if you want to look at it that way. So we're really trying to help the most vulnerable of Africa, and that is certainly the children. Again, the spiritual is our primary focus, but we can't ignore the humanitarian side. People there are so poor. I really wish you all could see the suffering, incredible suffering that's there. People who see loved ones die because there's no medicine for them, and they can't afford it if there was any. We cannot respond to that. There's a verse that has always haunted me from 1 John. That John says, if you have material goods and you see someone in need and you don't help them, how is the love of God in you? If we're the people of God and the light we talked about light this morning. If we're going to be the light of the world, how can we not respond to the suffering of people in the world? And I don't have time to get into COVID, but it has really done a number on Africa. It was slow to get there, but it's spreading like wildfire right now. But most seriously, it has really affected Africa economically. They're estimating, the UN, that the number of people living in severe poverty, and I thought they all were, but anyway, the number they call severe poverty is going to double this year because of the coronavirus. So we have the spiritual and the humanitarian side of our ministry. We want to be holistic. We're teaching our students to do holistic ministry, but we're also personally engaged in doing holistic ministry. Churches, most of the money that churches are giving us is going to the spiritual side of our ministry. The humanitarian side is pretty much being funded by individuals. Now, as you know, in the past, I've never said anything about money, but I just want to make a little appeal here to individuals, not to take anything away from me, the church here, or anything else you're doing, but if you want to help people who are suffering in this world, a little bit will make a big difference in these people's lives because they're so poor. Here is a way to do it. You can help either with the primary school, giving kids education in the lunch program, or in Karen's kids ministry, several things, baby formula and so forth. And then I just also want to throw out the endowment fund. I have tried everything I can to help this ministry to be as low cost as possible, and I've tried to develop ways for it to become self-supporting, but I just can't find. I've tried agriculture, chicken raising businesses, nothing, and nobody else seems to be able to do that. So I've come to the unfortunate conclusion that our ministry is going to forever depend on some American support. Well, that bothers me because I have an expiration date. I don't know where it is. I've been looking for it, but somewhere there, maybe it's in the bottom of my foot and I can't see. But I'm 64 and there's a time. I have no plans to retire, but one day that's going to happen. And what's going to happen to the ministry. And while I believe God provides, I think we need to use wisdom and make preparations. So we're trying to raise an endowment fund that when my days are finished, there'll be some way to help supplement and help the ministry continue for more years after me. So that's a big need that we have there. You can find more information on our webpage about any of this. Email me. Email address is on the webpage there. I began this morning by talking about how Paul, after his first missionary journey, came back to Antioch to tell them the great things that God is doing. And it was good news. The kingdom of God is growing. Look what is happening among the Gentiles. That had to be exciting news in Antioch for them to hear this great news. Well, in the same way, I'm here to tell you about great things God is doing in other parts of the world. I know it might look a little bleak in our backyard right now, at least temporarily, but folks, God is doing great things in this world. The elders and I last night had a discussion about great things. The kingdom of God is still growing very mightily in a lot of places in the world, and Africa is one of those places. And it's good news. Now, the question is do you want to make a difference in this world? Do you want to make a difference? Do you want to be a light to the world? There's a lot of things that you can involve yourself with. There's a lot of great humanitarian works out there, but I want to tell you something. If you just try to help people with their physical needs in humanitarian work, it isn't going to last. If we're handing out bags of rice today to starving people in Africa, we'll be doing it 100 years from now unless we address the real problem, and that is a spiritual problem. The biggest problem in Africa is not a lack of resources, a lack of money, and a lack of jobs. It is a spiritual problem. And if you ignore the spiritual, you're not going to have lasting results. Do you want to make a difference in this world? If you do, then I suggest you better be a partner with God. You need to be a part of God's plan to change and redeem this creation. And for you to do that, you got to be part of the kingdom of God. And so that's the question that we end with this morning. Are you a partner with God in the kingdom of God? If you're not, and you know what you need to do to change your life and become a light to the world, and to make a real difference in this world, then you got to be a part of God's kingdom. And if you know what to do and how to respond, or you have a need to respond, we're going to give you this invitation to do something about it right now as we stand and sing. Will you come?